Howdy, everybody. Chess College. How y'all doing out there? Um, it is 6 o'clock. Still 100 degrees here. You probably know because you live here. Yesterday was worse. Uh, anyway, and tomorrow's supposed to drip down to below 100. Oh, hope you're doing okay out there. Your next essay is due this Thursday. Essay number 3. On a musician, composer you choose from the list I provided, and it's due essentially at midnight. Midnight, folks. Thursday, or as Canvas calls it, 11:59 p.m. PM is the key. Don't be late. I'm getting to the point that you shouldn't be late. Like, if you're late, might as well not hand in the paper because simply you have an entire week to do it. Plenty of time. It's not like a rush job. It isn't. So hope you're doing good that way and enjoying yourself and learning something because these are some fascinating subjects and fascinating people and the times they lived in. And that's what I'm trying to get across to everybody in this course is look at the times these great writers, composers, painters, look at the times they lived in and how their art reflected those times. Um, right now, the what art is reflecting our times. That's a hard one because we're living in some difficult times. But all you have to do is look at the movies right now and wonder why they're putting out so many sequels, so many superhuman people running around in capes. Why is that? Well, there's a reason for it. We'll be talking about films next week. Um, but this week it's theater. And I hope you saw some of my announcements. I hope you will look at those documentaries I posted. What is theater? Why does it matter? What is your relationship to theater? I haven't looked at the discussions yet. I'm going to dive in there soon. Um, is it boring? Is it exciting? Is it something that doesn't even cross your mind? Uh, why? Why not? Would you like it to? We're 110 miles from Ashland. World class repertory theater up there. It's just not Shakespeare, folks. It's called the Ashland Shakespeare Festival, but they have new plays. Uh, and the smaller theaters, they have other American plays, and the other theaters, I've seen many plays up there from uh, Tennessee Williams to brand new plays, Sam Shepard and Shakespeare. So we're going to be dealing with Shakespeare for the next day or so, and literally, he's so important in the canon of theater that we cannot possibly cover it in a day or two. It's impossible. So I'm just giving you some information that will help you understand why theater matters. And here we are talking about a writer who's been dead for almost 500 years. If you turn to page 202 in your book, you have the book now, I hope. And it kind of goes through here. So I'm starting with that today. Might as well just start with Hamlet, is possibly his most famous play. Now, you may have seen a Shakespeare play. Maybe you read one in high school. It's usually Romeo and Juliet. Uh, that's fine because that's all they think high school students could take. Hamlet's a little too hefty for them. King Lear's a too hefty. Macbeth is a little too bloody. But those are the real deal, folks. So today, Hamlet, to be or not to be. Have you ever heard that quote? To be or not to be? Maybe you've heard it. Do you have any idea what it means? The next sentence is, that is the question. To be or not to be? That is the question. Look at that quote. It's on page 202. Look at it and try to understand why that quote, why we're still using the Shakespearean language and why it's so important even to this day. This year alone in New York City, they've had at least three productions, different productions of Hamlet. Why do they keep doing these plays over and over again? They had a hip hop version of Hamlet called Fat Ham, I think, which got great reviews. They set it in the modern era Brooklyn. But see, Hamlet is the tragedy of a good man going mad over revenge. That's never going to go out of style. To be or not to be, that is the question, is never going to be answered. It's an existential question that we all go through. Hopefully, you've gone through it. And it's not just about the obvious, which should be possibly, should I kill myself or not? There's that's in there, but it's other than that. He's questioning his beliefs, his place in the world. Why does he exist? You can substitute those words with a lot of other words. The subtext is that deep. And so every actor who does this, I'm going to post, um, if I can find it on YouTube, I'm going to post um, a thing on Hamlet. David Tennant played, if you know who that is, he's a British actor. Been on a bunch of stuff, Doctor Who for one. And he did Hamlet a couple years ago at the Old Globe in London. And this is a great series on PBS. And what he did to research and try to understand Hamlet, it's been done by so many people, the greatest actors of our time, some not so great. Do you have to be a great actor to understand it or do it? I don't believe you do. But you have to be sensitive and open to the possibilities and the mystery that that character envelops. So look at that. Maybe you'll want to watch an entire production of Hamlet. There's a lot out there to choose from. So look for there'll be a documentary on if I can find the David Tennant thing, him researching the role for Hamlet, and look at what he goes through to try to understand this character that's been done by some of the greatest actors of our times, from Laurence Olivier to Richard Burton to Mel Gibson in the movies. There's been several movies of Hamlet. Kenneth Branagh played Hamlet in the movies. It's why do we keep doing it over and over again in repertory? Meaning every production brings hopefully something new to it. In the 60s, they had a mod Hamlet. He was, you know what mod is? The dress, Carnaby Street, the swinging London Hamlet. You could play around with Hamlet. You don't have to make it in the times where it's set, which is essentially Denmark during the Renaissance. You could play it in modern dress. You could play it in the dress of Hamlet's era. I mean, of Shakespeare's era. Shakespeare was writing, he was coming up right in the middle of the Renaissance. The Renaissance was a movement that lasted a long time and brought about great changes in our arts, painters, Michelangelo, writers like William Shakespeare, novelists. There was a Renaissance because the cultures were changing. There was more people who knew how to read, more people who knew how to write, and they had a longing for the collective experience that an audience has. There was no movie theaters in those days, but they had stages. They've always had a stage. Even in the caveman days, they were putting on plays at the back of the cave. And then about 2,000 years ago, the Greeks put on huge pageantry plays, stage plays. Electra, Oedipus Rex, Antigone. Some of our greatest theater is 2,000 years old, long before Shakespeare ever wrote To Be or Not to Be. Read one of those plays. I dare you to even look at one, even to skim it. You'd be surprised how easy it is to understand. Yes, it was written in a different language, Latin for the most part, translated many times since then to make it clear and understandable. But because people don't change, jealousies, revenge, seeking a better life, love, unrequited love, none of that changes. It's just the technology that changes. And so Shakespeare, when he was writing in the Renaissance, they built a theater, the Old Globe Theater in London. And they built it for the people, by the way. It wasn't just for the aristocracy. His language is heightened poetry, written in what they call iambic pentameter. That's a type of poetry that has to be said a certain way. People didn't talk that way. It seems highbrow now, meaning, oh, you have to be educated to really understand it. Not really. You have to work at it, yes. That's why watching Shakespeare, watching Hamlet, perhaps is makes more sense than reading it, because plays are meant to be performed on the stage. But there's all sorts of ways to read it, with Cliff Notes, Spark Notes, all the help you can get. It's worth it, because it's that deep, and it's that honest, and it's that truth, and it's that terrifying. How 500 years later, we're still going through the same things. Political upheaval, political assassinations, look what just happened in Japan. The politics of, look at this country in the last 10 years. Look what's happening in England. Boris Johnson just quit. And Shakespeare was writing about political intrigue, palace intrigue 500 years ago. And we're still going through it. So for now, we have cell phones and electric cars. Why does Shakespeare scare you? Have you ever seen any Shakespeare? Don't let it scare you. Embrace it, because it's who we are. When you see theater that has the ability to change us, change you as a culture. This week, one of the great directors in theater, Peter Brook, died. He was very old, 97, and he directed plays for the last 60 years. He did a version of Hamlet, Marat Sade. He would do very, very difficult works. One of his plays was done in 85 based on Indian Sanskrit, was 8 hours long. The play was 8 hours, folks, and it was a sellout in New York City. People would watch it for 3 hours. They'd go off and take a lunch break. They'd come back, and then they'd watch it for 3 more hours. They'd take a break, have a drink or two across the street, come back, and finish it off. Nobody was bored by it. It was long before TikTok videos made everything over 14 seconds long irrelevant. The telling of any story is in the detail, and Peter Brook knew how to eke the details out on King Lear, which is a Shakespeare play, the likes nobody had ever seen, because he believed in rehearsal. He believed in to rehearse and to try to understand not just the text, but the physicality of the characters, the movement. He worked on movement like a dance choreographer. If you understood the movement of your character, it would help you understand who that character is. Any actor worth their salt tries not to move like themselves. How did Hamlet move? Well, I don't know. Nobody does. He's a made up character. But he doesn't move like we do now, which is a modern way of moving. And so lots of actors have him very stylized, his movement, his hands gestures. That's all because the play's 500 years old. And we aren't just contemporary, even though we're doing the play in a contemporary times. But this goes for anything. Death of a Salesman, which was written in the 40s. They moved differently in the 40s. They dressed differently. There was no cell phones. It's just old-fashioned telephones. It was a different world. And so the world those characters move in is different than how we move about today. Really in a hurry, going to Starbucks, getting our drinks fast, getting out, doing an app to get our drinks, going in, popping out. Very little contact with the humans around us. Well, things were slower. Action, not like now. So theater is all about connection. What connects us all? We all could relate to Hamlet, all of us. You don't have to have a father that's been murdered by his brother or betrayed by his wife to understand Hamlet. Or Macbeth. Or King Lear. Or Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet is a simple love story about two 14-year-olds, by the way, but they're from different families. They're at war with each other. It's not going to end good. It doesn't end good. Do you remember how Romeo and Juliet ends? It ends in suicide. Mistaken, nonetheless. When you're 14 and you feel that desperate and so supposedly in love, and when that love is destroyed in front of you, you want to die also. Look what's happening now in the culture. How many children, kids, 12 and 13, are committing suicide over social media? How is that any different than Romeo and Juliet? I just read an article in the New York Times the other day. A young boy was made fun of at school, came home and hung himself in his bedroom. 12 years old. He'd rather not die than because somebody made fun of him. So when you watch something like Romeo and Juliet, does it seem that far fetched that they would kill themselves over this unrequited love from these two families that are at war with each other? Shakespeare had his hand on the pulse of who we are. So look at that little document, Shakespeare. Now I'm going to post something about Hamlet. Read chapter, I think it's chapter 9 on theater and why it matters. The next time I lecture you, tomorrow, the next day, we'll be ratcheting it up into contemporary times. Until then, to be or not to be? That is the question. See you next time.